Guys, what's up nga? Today maglalaro tayo ng Mobile Legends. At alam nyo naman 40k na tayo. Kasi diba yung kita ninyo part 1 natin 30k pa lang tayo. Yan lang pets ko. Pero hindi pa kasi ako nakaka 30 rewards, meron akong ganito. Diba? Ayan lang yun. Sunog son. Wala. Aray naman. Fortune ko ulap. Yun na, nagpupusap. 100 na kukuha ko. Diba?
It took NASA a few more months before they managed to do a full orbital spaceflight. In February 1962, John Glenn was the first American astronaut to orbit around Earth. After the first orbital spaceflight, NASA accomplished all three main goals of Project Mercury. The first human spaceflight program of the United States continued until although some flights were canceled, all of the 6 crewed Mercury flights were successful. In total, the project resulted in 53 hours, 55 minutes, and 27 seconds of space flights. Over the course of 5 years, NASA estimated the total costs of Project Mercury was $135.3 million for the spacecraft, $82.9 million for the launch vehicles, $29.3 million for operations, $71.9 million for tracking operations and equipment, and $53.2 million for facilities. In total, the cost for Project Mercury was $392.6 million. This would be equivalent to about $2.3 billion today. Having been beaten to the punch by the Soviet Union for a second time, the United States knew that they had to step up their game. That's why in 1962, John F. Kennedy gave a historical speech that confirmed NASA's newest project.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and the other thing. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal serves to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
This sent a very clear message to the Soviets. The race to put a man on the moon had officially begun. Both the United States and the Soviet Union started preparing for one of the biggest challenges in human history. While previous missions under Project Mercury had confirmed that astronauts would at least endure the stresses of flying through space, in the grand scheme of things, NASA was relatively inexperienced. Keep in mind that the moon is very far away. Perhaps much further than you would think. In fact, the moon is on average 384,000 kilometers away from the Earth. A mission to go to the moon and back would take more than a week. While the longest mission NASA had done with Project Mercury was only 1 day and 10 hours. That's why NASA initiated the Gemini program in 1961. With this program, NASA had to learn what happened when astronauts spent many days in space, how astronauts could go outside a spacecraft in a spacesuit, and how to connect 2 spacecraft together in space. NASA designed a new Gemini capsule that could accommodate 2 astronauts instead of just 1. Besides it being much bigger than the Mercury spacecraft, it also had significant improvements. For example, it didn't have an escape tank because it was too heavy, and instead used ejection seats in case of an emergency. It also added much more control. While the Mercury spacecraft could only roll, pitch, and yaw, the Gemini spacecraft could also move other directions, like forward, backward, and sideways. The rockets that were used during Project Mercury were also changed. Instead, NASA adapted an even bigger 33-meter-tall Titan II rocket, formerly used as a missile, so that it could propel humans into space. Of course, they tested it without any astronauts first, just to make sure it worked. In April 1964, the Gemini One was launched. generated a whopping 1,900 kilonewtons at liftoff. The objective of the Gemini One was to test the structural integrity of the new capsule, as well as the modified Titan II launch vehicle. After a successful flight, the Titan II was considered man-rated. In other words, safe for use in human spaceflight. However, a second unmanned launch was needed to make sure the Gemini capsule was also man-rated. These early successes paved the way for the first manned Gemini flight, Gemini 3, on March 23, 1965. It was piloted by astronauts Gus Grissom and John Young. Their main objective was to test the maneuverability of the spacecraft. In space, they completed 3 low Earth orbits in their spacecraft, which they nicknamed Wally Brown. The mission was considered a success. However, Young had smuggled a sandwich on board. Both men took a few bites while in mid-flight. The drones could have interfered with the spacecraft's electronics. Grissom later stated that one of the highlights of the flight was when Young offered him this strictly non-regulation goodie. While it may seem like the United States was pushing far ahead, the Soviets obtained
So, gusto nyo mag-comment lang kayo dyan kung anong gusto nyong laruin ko.
almost a year before the launch of
Squid
Gemini
Game ba o
One.
si
The
Mr.
Soviet
Funny
sent the
o
first woman into
kung
space
anong
aboard a
gusto
38
nyo.
meter tall rocket. The cosmonaut's name was Valentina Tereshkova. Although sending the first woman into space was a notable achievement, it was the fact that she returned to Earth after
Ayan lang yung stats ko, guys. Ayan, wala.
2 days and 22 hours.
Sorry lang.
Truly
Sorry.
remarkable. At that point in time, Valentina had
So,
spent more time in space than all U.S.
paano?
astronauts combined in just one continuous flight. What's more,
Gusto ko laruin na yun.
Soviet
Ay,
cosmonaut
hindi
Valery
pa lang.
Makovsky orbited Earth 82 times and set a space
So,
endurance
pili
record,
kayo kung anong
completing a solo flight that
ano
lasted
yun natin
for 4 days and
papanoodin.
23 hours. The cosmonaut records and achievements kept on coming too. Spacewalks,
Diba?
EVAs,
iPad
extravehicular
lalaruin.
activities were an essential part of the process if any man was ever going to walk on the moon. On March 18, 1965, Russian cosmonaut Alexei Leonov became the first person to leave the space
Tingnan
capsule
ko lang
and float
yung
freely in orbit
may
while still
viewers
attached
na
to the
agad itong
spacecraft.
pinost ko eh.
Even though he was only outside his capsule for approximately 12 minutes, Leonov's suit swelled up and he couldn't get back inside via the airlock. He had to bleed his suit many times beyond what was considered safe to make his suit more flexible until he could eventually squeeze back into the spacecraft. Leonov later explained that his spacesuit was soaked in sweat from the terrifying experience. In spite of his near-death experience, the cosmonaut had secured yet another massive milestone victory for the Soviets.
Yun lang.
As you'd
2
expect, though,
viewers.
NASA was
Yan lang
on
yung
the
mga
Russians'
viewers.
heels. Less than 3 months later, on June 3rd, 1965, American astronaut Ed White undertook a spacewalk that lasted 23 minutes during the flight of Gemini 4. At the time, that was considered a great accomplishment and a lengthy spacewalk. To put this achievement into context, nowadays astronauts at the International Space Station go on spacewalks for up to 8 hours, depending on their mission. With NASA's Gemini flights coming rapidly in 1965, Gemini 7 was launched on December 4th. Its astronauts were Frank Borman and Jim Lovell. It's the same Jim Lovell who later became mission commander of the infamous Apollo 13 mission. Gemini 7 was significant because it set an endurance record of almost 14 days in space. The crew orbited Earth 206 times in that span of time and doubled the total duration that any human had spent in space so far. This mission was incredibly important since it proved that humans could survive for long durations in space, which was necessary for going to the moon. Gemini 8 took off on March 16, 1966, with the purpose of successfully docking 2 spacecraft in orbit. While technically this was achieved, the flight is also noted for being the first U.S. spacecraft to suffer a critical in-space system failure, which put its astronauts' lives at risk. The crew consisted of David Scott and the most famous astronaut of all time, Neil Armstrong. For largely unknown reasons, shortly after docking, a thruster malfunction put the spacecraft and its crew into a spin. According to NASA, as the spin rate approached 1 revolution per second, the astronauts' vision became blurred. The tumbling needed to be stopped. Thankfully, Armstrong's quick thinking enabled him to regain control of the spacecraft by using the re-entry control system to stop the spin. The crew of Gemini 8 safely returned to Earth in the early hours of the next day. Despite the wild ride, completing the actual docking procedure was a vital step forward into the essential process of the moon landings. The original
Dito gusto mo lagi eh.
Charles Bassett sadly never got the chance to experience their group in space. On a return flight with a jet plane, only to see trying to land the airplane since he missed the runway. In the following months, more Gemini missions.
Uy, sige, tara! Pasok na tayo doon! Higil ka pa? Tayo na lang! Wala niyo! Hol!
12 set a new record for the longest spacewalk, with 5 hours and 30 minutes. From 1961 to 1966, a total of 12
Bakit?
missions were completed
Baseball bat na ang dala nito.
Gemini, including 2
Kanina, dildo yan ah. Oh, 9 inches pa nga eh.
Gemini sets a huge leap forward.
Ready mag-crash. So, paano na?
Inflation over $10 billion today. At the end of Project Gemini in 1966,
Yan
NASA
lang.
felt well positioned to achieve its ultimate goal and the promise their president had put forward to send man to the moon and be the first nation to set foot on it. NASA's theories had been put into practice, lessons had been learned, and their crew had gained some vital experience. All that was left now is to go out there and actually do it. Among the many incredible feats and astonishing missions that NASA has undertaken throughout the years, there's one space program that stands out above the rest: Apollo.
Ano yan?
The numerous tests and the 12 manned space flights that took place between 1961 and 1972 altered the course of human history and effectively put an end to the space race between the USA and the Soviet Union. In one of these Apollo missions, the Soviet Union seemed to be the frontrunner in the space race, since they had achieved many firsts. However, with the arrival of the Apollo program, NASA and the United States were determined to strike back. Although the Apollo missions were later dedicated to President John F. Kennedy's publicized goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth, the program was actually first conceived during the administration of Dwight D. Eisenhower, the president who came before Kennedy. It was intended as a follow-up to Project Mercury, and to explore 3-man space flights as opposed to the 2-man flights with the Gemini spacecraft or the solo flights with the Mercury spacecraft. According to NASA, Apollo's main goals included establishing the technology to meet other national interests in space,